Yeah, good morning, everyone. This is Trevor Pope working with Tiffany Quinlan, our Group 8. This week we're going to discuss large objects and how you read the files into internally stored columns. So the underlying question of this is how do you load large objects directly when they exceed the byte limitations of PL/SQL or SQL, which is 32K, which is not very much. That is done through the DBMS lob package. So we'll walk through a little bit of that today on how we go about doing that. We're going to look at reading local files into clobs, NC globs, or Uncle Bob, or whoever, whatever you want to call them. We're going to look at local files into the blobs and working with lobs through web page. Maybe just as a backup, just as a review, what are clobs, NC lobs, blobs, etc., etc. So just as a quick refresher, a lob, large object, a C lob or clob, however the nerds say it, is a character large object, which is, it can store up to 4 gigabytes of data, of text, which is a lot. It's like 260,000 word pages or some ridiculous thing like that. But it's formatted with text and it's character driven. The NC lob or the nclob is the same thing as a clob, but it's done using national character sets, which is, I have no idea why anybody would use that, because from what I read, it takes up more memory and blah, blah, blah. A blob is a binary large object, which is anything from images to audio files, video clips, or anything like that. It's just binary. It's just one thing. And it's typically, quote unquote, unformatted, meaning there's no text descriptions, etc., associated with it. So that's important to know, because how you work with these things and how big of files you can work with. So when you want to start loading this stuff into a database, how do you do it? The first step is working with virtual directories, and you have to set permissions. So in the Linux environment, which we've been using, you have to do that through the create directory in the temp folder. If you're working in Windows, you work in the temp folder, and then you grant read access to that directory to in our case, the student user. Pretty straightforward there. So when we want to load files, we can use two approaches. We can use a PL/SQL procedure on the server, or you can use an external programming language such as PHP. So it depends on what you're trying to accomplish and how often, I guess, or benefits one over the other. Not really sure at this point, but I guess if you're working directly in the database and just want to keep everything local to that, then the PL/SQL procedure might be the solution. Certainly using PHP and other programming languages, for example, would be ideal if you're particularly working in a web environment, because then you can code everything and then access the database without having to worry about the SQL side. So reading local files into the clob or NC clob columns, you've got to work with a variety of functions and procedures. You're going to work with the bfilename function, returning the canonical directory path from the database catalog, and you're going to append the file name to it. You've got the open procedure, the DBMS lob open. It opens the external file and it reads it into a bfile data type. And then your load clob from file procedure transfers the contents of the open file to the clob locator. Next, we got to read local file, or we can read local files into the blob columns. Functions and procedures there. We've got the bfilename function, again, returns the canonical directory path from the database catalog, and it appends the file name. It opens, you use your open procedure and opens the external file and reads it into the bfile data type. and the load blob from file procedure reads it into a B file data type and transfer the contents of the open file to the blob locator. One of the key features of all these of the lob package that we start with is because of the size of these files. A lot of times they have to be broken down into chunks, and that's where these lob package procedures fit in. Is it takes a large file, 1 gig, 2 gigs, whatever, and it breaks it into chunks, and it continues to append to the chunk file with other pieces of the data, and allows you to bring in large chunks of data into that manner. So that's one of the reasons why this is the preferred method. Working with lobs through web pages, you've got to open the CLOB locator and access it from a PHP library file. In this case, the example in the book was done with PHP, so that's why we're talking about it. You've got to get a CLOB locator with an in and out mode access. You've got to use the returning into clause, so it provides a local variable into the set clause variable, and then without a commit in the stored procedure, it leaves everything locked, and you can do the DML transaction with the external web program. This is the actual example. So first, you've got your formal parameter in line 3. The descriptor in out clob is. Second, then you've got a returning item description into descriptor. Provides a local variable gateway into the set clauses column in line 7. And then third, at the end there, because there's no commit in the procedure, it leaves the clob locked, and you can then work with it from an external program. So I think that was a little bit out of our scope this week, but procedures are there. So anyway, quickly in review, we've did a quick review of what clobs, NC clobs, and blobs, and et cetera, are. We have to work with virtual directories, to work with the bfile_name function, and that lets you find the external files. You can load the clob, blob, whatever from file procedure. It lets you read that entity into that file into its location and in its entirety or in chunks. Whether it's text or video or photos or whatever, it just depends on which one you use. Clobs would be text-based, and blobs would be video or pictures or other things, binary type data. Pass by reference procedure enables a web-based program to open all this up, get locator value, and then you can manage your objects through HTTP stuff. And external programming languages, you can open, access, and load large objects through pass-by references in stored procedures. So hopefully this provided a little clarity to everyone. Thanks for listening, and good luck to everyone this week. Thanks.